Welcome to another great video. We're talking TFSAs. We get lots of questions. What happens when you die? Do they stop being taxable? How does all that work? We're going to cover that, and with good reason. TFSAs are very popular.
They are. They are very popular. They've become much more popular over the last month, and they're flexible and as an account can go. Now, according to 2022 statistics, though, there was over 17.7 million TFSA holders. And out of that, there was 28.2 million TFSAs, which, again, you can have a TFSA of more than one institution, which is what a lot of people do. So on average, that's about 1.6 TFSAs per person. So you're holding them at different institutions. And in that same sort of time frame over there were 184,640 TFSAs with deceased holders. So these deceased holders, of course, are going to have some sort of a scenario where it's going to a beneficiary, something along those lines. And how you set up your TFSA definitely will have an impact on the estate. And there's really 4 scenarios that we should be looking at.
And that's what we're going to cover. The 4 scenarios. How does it impact tax? How does it impact your estate? And this isn't just theoretical. Like you talked about 181,000 people in 2022 were dealing with this very situation.
Yep.
So it will happen eventually. The first scenario here is you have a spouse and you name them a successor holder or successor annuitant.
Ooh, what's that?
We love jargon in the financial world, so we had to create new jargon specific to this tax-free account. So only a spouse can be listed as a successor holder. We're using successor holder. Some firms will call it successor annuitant. It's the same thing. Successor is really the key piece here. That's normally common across institutions. When you pass that successor holder, they just take over the account. They get a full TFSA. They inherit the full value of the TFSA. It simply gets added to their TFSA. So it does not impact their room. So if my spouse is maxed out per our TFSA and then I die, it doesn't matter that she's maxed out. My TFSA just rolls over into her TFSA. She gets the full value. All of it's tax-free, and all of it continues to grow tax-free because it's now in her TFSA. So that's a really good option that only applies to the successor holder, and only the spouse can be deemed the successor holder. And again, all of it rolls over. No taxation. All of it's tax-free. A little wrinkle here, unfortunately, in Quebec. So rest of Canada, this applies. Quebec, you don't get the successor holder. They only have beneficiaries. So this scenario would not apply to Quebec.
That's right.
That was scenario 1. Scenario 2, you still have your spouse, but you don't use that special term. You use the term beneficiary.
Yeah. Now, if you use the term beneficiary, it's very similar in the fact that ideally you'd like the successor annuitant, but if you name them as beneficiary, the money will go to them, and they can, and this is where the difference comes in, they can go and file its CRA, which is known as a form RC-240, for designation of an exempt contribution. So basically what that would do is then it would allow you to do the same thing as the successor annuitant, but you have to apply to do it because you were named as beneficiary as opposed to that. Now, the form must be filled within the rollover time period, which is date of death until December 31st of that year, following the death. Following year of the death. And the form allows, as I say, that to go without a penalty. If not, and the other thing that's going to go on is, depending on what's going on, it will go from date of death, that money can go in, but anything growth-wise beyond that, that's still a taxable scenario that has to go deemed with the TFSA.
A little wrinkle there, right? If you're the successor holder, nothing's taxed. It all just goes to your spouse or common law partner, and it just continues to grow as a TFSA.
That's right.
If you, for some reason, didn't use that term and use beneficiary for your spouse, they have some paperwork. They file that RC-240 form within the time period. Now they can add the money to their TFSA, but only the value as of the date of death. If this process takes a few months, which would be common, any growth during that period would be taxable. So there's a little wrinkle there. That would be more beneficial to have it as successor annuitant as opposed to your spouse's beneficiary. But largely similar, apart from a little bit of growth since the date of death. We'll go on the other 2 scenarios. We said 4, we covered 1, we covered 2. There's 2 more to go, but folks have questions on this kind of stuff. How do they get answers?
Go to chatwithclintonandkevin.com. By all means, we'll answer any questions you have on your TFSAs or other financial matters that you're dealing with. If you've had that beneficiary already as your spouse, what happens if you don't have your spouse? You can name anybody else's beneficiary.
Maybe I want my brother. Maybe I want my cat's former bowling coach. Whoever, you can name someone as beneficiary. You're allowed to do that. It's your account. Only the spouse can be successor holder. Remember,
that's the big one.
So scenario 1, only successor holder applies to the spouse. Beneficiary applies to really whoever you want to name for your account. When you die, the value as of the date of death, that is tax-free. So if I die, there's $102,000 in my TFSA. That $102,000 goes to my beneficiary. If I name my brother gets a check for $102,000. Here you go, fully tax-free. Now my brother could turn around and take that money and put it into his TFSA if he has a room. He did not have the room. Well, He still got the cash tax-free, can do with it what he'd like, but he would not be able to add it to his TFSA if he does not have the room. And then there's the idea of the growth since the day of passing.
That's the big one.
Estates take some time. There's always paperwork involved, so there's not going to be quick. It could take a few weeks, a few months to settle. And let's say I died, the value is $102,000. By the time the forms are done, that's now $103,000. The money grew by an extra $1,000 during that period. That growth since the day of death would be taxable to my beneficiary. So technically, my brother, as my beneficiary, he got all that money once I died. That extra $1,000 of growth, not tax-free. He would get a tax slip from the institution. Whoever held my TFSA would issue my brother a tax slip.
They would.
And have to report that growth, in my example, $1,000, when he does his tax return. So a little bit of a nuance there. Now, a wrinkle that hopefully no one has to contend with if the tape drags on. Let's say it's a long process. People are fighting each other. It takes forever to settle. There is a period, and Kevin mentioned it earlier, date of death, December 31st of the year following. So if I die in June, I have until December 31st of the following year, or my family does, to sort it all out. And if they don't, unfortunately, the TFSA loses the tax-free status. It's now treated as a trust. This really only applies to the growth
area.
The date of passing. So everything up to the day I die, fully tax-free. Anything that happened, any interest earned beyond that point would be taxed. How it's taxed would change if you go beyond this period.
Yes.
Effectively, the TFSA becomes a trust. Trusts have different tax rates. It could get more expensive. So ideally, you wrap it all up within the period. I'll quickly mention, you talked about chatwithclintonkevin.com. We do have another way you can get more information if you like financial planning videos and little content. We have a newsletter as well with some financial planning tips. Link in the description if you'd like to sign up. We went through 3 scenarios here, Kevin. We'll talk about the 4th. What if you just don't name a beneficiary at all?
Yeah, maybe it's no beneficiary. You've left it to your estate. You just don't want to name a person. You don't have anything there. It's not going to a charity, anything else. It goes to your estate. Well, basically, this is a very similar option to what just happened in the one beforehand. If you do not name anything, the TFSA goes to your estate. Of course, the value at the date of death is still tax-free. So if it was that $102,000 example, that $102,000 will go to your estate tax-free. There's no taxes the estate's going to have to worry about paying on it. That's free and clear. But again, you're going through the estate. If there's probate fees, depending on where you live, those are going to have to be paid by the estate on that balance that's there on something along the lines. Any growth since that date of death, of course, as with any beneficiary, becomes taxable. That's a big factor going on. And again, if the estate drags on, we have the same sort of scenario. You're allowed to die. If you died June of one year, December of the following year, after that, it becomes a trust. And then the trust scenario goes through again. So as you can see, basically, it's very similar to naming it as anyone as beneficiary, except that the estate is dealing with this as opposed to a person. Everything else seems to be very much similar as if you'd named brother, son-in-law, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and with estates, probate can be a factor. Really depends where you live. Some provinces it's a non-event. Others, it could be a more costly situation. So it really varies across Canada. But that'd be the only wrinkle of difference. Probate. About all of this, you kind of bring it all home. What is the most tax-efficient scenario? Well, it'd be number one. If you have a spouse, you want them to get the money, you name them as successor holder.
Check that out.
Problem solved. So step 1, you want to double check your designations. If your goal is to leave your spouse or common law partner, make sure it's successor holder, successor annuitant. It is using that successor term because that's the most tax efficient and best way to do it. And of course, this is all part of the Becker Orr mantra,
which is have a plan. Just make sure that you have this as part of your larger part of your estate planning, your whole financial plan. Make sure you've looked at this and it's designated there. It is something that you should update and check regularly. But if nothing's changing, then make sure you go for the successor first if you have a spouse. If not, then any named beneficiary.
Absolutely. And if you like this video, the one on the screen right now, talking about common TFSA mistakes, what not to do, click that video. We'll see you again very soon.
Take care.